Leading Entrepreneurs of the World, our conference here in 2022. We are joined next by Patrick Kelley. He's the founder and CEO of Critical Path Security. And Patrick's going to talk to us about the Accidental CISO, what to do in your first 90 days. Patrick, welcome. Let me hand it off to you.
Hey, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining this session this afternoon. I've caught some of the presenters that have gone on earlier in the day, catching the most recent one about serendipity, which I thought was absolutely amazing and insightful. And I'm thrilled to have you here, and I hope I can live up to the expectation that he set before us. So the whole point of this talk is that these days we're having a lot of individuals that are being forced into that chief information security officer position in the organization. And quite often it may be a technical person, an IT manager, it could be the chief finance officer as they are used to dealing with risk. But quite often there isn't a sort of defined methodology for training someone into being a CISO. And they sort of accidentally fall into this space as their industry continues to evolve and regulatory compliance sort of comes and wraps its hands around the organization. And I think we've all learned in the past couple of years that cybersecurity events are on the rise, and they're creating some significant challenges. So a little bit about me. I'm CEO, founder of Critical Path Security in Lagos. I started my time in the field about 26 years ago. And I have a lot of joy that goes around in helping new companies and groups kind of find themselves and build their cybersecurity programs and understand how to take all the new technology and all of the attacks and put some risk construct around it. Spent a lot of time speaking on panels. Think this is going to be my 200 or 250th talk in the past couple of years. And I spent a great deal of time with the NSA, FBI, Homeland Security, and a great deal of time around finance and helping brand new companies such as yours figure out how to move forward in a safe way and how to extend their company in this ever-changing world that we're in since the pandemic. So as an accidental CISO, you accept or you've had the title pushed upon you in the organization, and you might have a moment of going, what do I do now? How do I go from looking at, P&Ls? How do I go and look at these balance sheets? Or how do I move from being a Windows admin or a network admin into being a CISO? And what do all these regulatory compliances want from me? If you've been in the IT space in the past year or two, you're probably experiencing a high amount of turnover, a high amount of growth, and new people that are coming in and old people that are leaving, as was mentioned in a couple talks ago, that sort of that generation of starting in an organization and working there for 20 and 25 years, it's not really where we are these days. So what I want to do is help you define where do you go from here. So you need to get to know the organization. And even if you've worked in the organization for 5 or 6 years, your vantage point in being a CISO is going to be quite different. Or if you are a founder or an entrepreneur and you're having to take on some of these roles yourself. And so the first thing you're going to want to do is kind of understand what does this organization do? What's the goals of the board of directors? What are the goals of the shareholders? You may find that as you transition from one role into another, that the priorities and the things that you're responsible for doing will change a great deal. And you're going to have to find your place in that. Because if you're moving from an outside organization in, or you're moving from maybe a director of IT or an entrepreneur that's joined this organization, or you've been acquired, you might find that how you fit and where your place in the organization could be quite different. And that's going to require you ask a whole lot of questions and you answer, a lot of your own questions internally around how do I engage the board? How do I take this mission and convey it to the board of directors and the shareholders? How do I take, most importantly, all of this technical lingo and all the information that's coming to me from my outside vendors? How do I communicate that in risk? How do I take what's important to me and make it understandable to the board of directors? Or how do I make that understandable to the rest of the C-suite? Because there is a pretty significant gap these days between those that are very technical in our space and those that can communicate what's going on in that technical role over into the organization and the leadership. There tends to be a desire when you first get started into one of these positions to want to give directives, to want to rush in and try to develop some sort of plan or program and rush that plan into place. Now, to be fair, there's a lot of really good reason for that. There's news headlines every day that here's another company that's been breached, or here's another regulatory compliance change that's come down from CMMC or PCI or HIPAA, or any number of different ones that are constantly urging you to move forward. If you're in the Bay Area this week, you may be at the RSA conference, which you have billions of dollars, literally, that are being pushed into that conference to tell you a problem that you didn't know that you have, that the company can solve for you. And before you understand the organization and you know your place and you know how to be a catalyst of change, if change is needed, you're going to have to know that before you start buying technology and implementing it and before you start issuing directives. So I tell you, in one of your first steps is help facilitate the initiatives and the goals of the organization as they were when you came in. And then once you understand the organization and you know your place and you've facilitated and you built these relationships, that's when you start to build your program. Now, I'm going to give a little bit of a pro tip here before we get started. If you are not on really, really good speaking terms with your general counsel or your outside legal team, do that. Take them out, get them coffee, go get lunch, find out what is important to them. When there is a communication gap between the technology of cybersecurity and the risk business approach of cybersecurity, general counsel is going to be your very best friend. They know how to communicate risk to the org. They know how to fine tune a message and make sure that it falls into liability and efficiency and how things need to be solved. So again, if you're not on really, really good speaking terms with your general counsel or your legal, I implore you to go and do that. Now, your mission, clearly defined here on the left side of the screen. You have to understand the organization and your place in it as quickly as possible. Again, one mouth, two ears. So ask questions, listen intently. Listen to the things that people aren't telling you. There's a lot that goes into body language, and if you've studied the McKinsey 7S's, you'll understand that style is one of those S's. So you need to understand the body language and how someone is trying to communicate to you what's important to them. So ask a lot of questions, listen to those questions. The other is you need to develop a program that supports and enables the business to move quickly and as reasonably as possible with those security risks and concerns in mind. But also be mindful that there is a risk appetite and there is a change appetite. And quite often, neither of those things are going to be defined and written down on a piece of paper. When I go into organizations and we're putting a program together, when we're looking for solutions or administrative controls that we're going to put in place or policies that we put in place, I'm very mindful of the body language of those that I'm speaking to. And when I start to mention some changes, I look for them to become tense. That kind of gives me an idea of when we are starting to approach that change appetite and where we're exhausting that. So make sure that you're paying close attention to the risk that the company is able to withstand and what they're willing to sustain to take and withstand, and understand that change appetite and what you can move through. Very specifically to move forward in these goals is interview your predecessor. there is a person that was likely in that seat in some capacity before you got there. You want to have a very, very close, candid conversation with them. If you can, try to do this off-site to where they don't have any pressure to not share things with you that you need to know. Also, if possible, you want to get their endorsement. There's a good chance that you're going to be picking up some parts of their program and that you're going to pick up responsibility and management of their team. Now, there's going to be a lot of concern, from their team. How are you going to lead that's different? Is the program going to change? Are your initiatives different? And you want to make sure that you get close to your predecessor's alignment without maybe necessarily changing your own plan. But if you can get their endorsement and that of leadership, you'll find that building those relationships in the organization, which is so much harder with the amount of work from home and work from anywhere that we have, it's going to help you move across that gap a little bit quicker. As I said earlier, facilitate decisions immediately instead of making them. Helping facilitate decisions as they exist and things that need to move across. One, it's going to get you some buy-in. It's going to show the rest of the C-suite that you are a team player. It's going to show that your new employees that you are a team player. And make sure that you value vocally the things that they're bringing to your team. If you have rock stars in your information security team, make sure that you showcase what their contributions to the organization, because their contributions is a direct reflection on your leadership. As a leader here at Critical Path, one thing that I always avoid is saying, I built this or I did this thing, because I'm wise enough to know that I didn't build anything. I may have had an idea, and that idea may have sprouted some legs and may be sprinting at this point and running marathons. But the moment that I say I did something, I know that is when my understanding and my point of view of my organization and my team is incredibly skewed. Focus on things such as, we built this, we did this thing, we created, we solved this problem, because that's going to really enable your team to have the confidence to do the very best job that they can. But you want to find quick wins as quick as you can, because you want to build momentum. You want to have wins, and everyone loves some wins. So try to look for those things where you can get off on that good foot, and you can bring that team and you can get them aligned with you, and you have some good wins on hand to build that confidence and refer back to. Now, initial alignment of self and of the program is going to be very, very important, and you have to be very flexible in the ability to pivot. I can't tell you how many times I've gone into an organization and we've gone through that plan and we've gone through the alignment, and I will find out in the first 72 hours that maybe what I thought I understood is not really what's going on. So when you go in, make sure that not only are you flexible, because you might find that you need to bend or you need to adjust how you communicate and what you communicate to better fit that 7S of style, to where you can communicate and you understand and you're working really well within that group. So be very, very flexible. When you're building a program, I highly recommend that you look at frameworks such as NIST, CMMC, RC3 if you're working in the DOE, sort of energy space. These are going to help you get started. They're frameworks here, so you don't kind of have to sit back and think, what do I need to look at next? Okay, well, logically, what would I look at next? There have been tens of thousands of hours, if not hundreds, that have been poured into frameworks that are very well defined, that will help you move forward with building that alignment and having that framework that you can measure your success and measure your failures. Understand those C-suite concerns. And you're not going to learn this in the first day, probably not even going to learn it in the first month. Make sure you're speaking to governance. Make sure you're speaking to the CEO. Make sure you're speaking to finance. Their opinions greatly matter, and their responsibilities are quite different across the organization. We all have several of the same goals and the missions that we're trying to achieve, but our parts in it are quite different. And you want to make sure that you are helping them succeed so that they can help your team succeed as well. When you first start building your program, getting into that quantitative analysis is going to be really, really hard, but you need to work towards that. And if you're not familiar with qualitative and quantitative analysis, it's when you first start into a problem and you go, this feels secure, this feels efficient, this feels like it's working. When you start defining what success looks like in these different components and you measure them, for instance, let's take a technical control. You're putting in new firewalls. If you quantify what it is you need from those firewalls, and then you can grade how they are performing, that helps you move towards truly understanding how that control is working. And there are probably a dozen or more controls that you're going to be dealing with. But it goes down to process too. How long are my support tickets? What is my average time for getting a incident, an initial notification of an incident, and closing that? You want to find out, because at that point in time, you can define what your burden is, and you can really know by number how successful you really are. Because leading off feel is okay for a moment, but if you're like me, when you start to do that quantitative analysis and you're looking at the numbers, it becomes very obvious how much bias we tend to feed into our own decisions. So I would encourage you to move into that as quickly as possible. The next thing is, let's focus on reducing risk and not eliminating it. Though we would all love to eliminate all risk in the organization, that's not really how it works. Remember, we're trying to fit into a risk appetite and a change appetite. So if we look at reducing risk and getting it into that appetite, as opposed to getting tunnel vision or a little myopic on a singular task of eliminating a particular risk, the overall comprehensive program that you're putting together is going to work better. And it's going to reduce the entire risk of the organization, and it's going to increase the security posture. Remember, that's the goal. So we're trying to reduce things down so that they fit into the risk appetite and the change appetite, and we're trying to increase the security posture of the org. Now, as I mentioned, in case you're not familiar with the McKinsey 7S, it's strategy, structure, systems, shared value, skill, style, and staff. Now, the hard elements are things that are going to remain in place probably for the duration of your time, which is the strategy, the structure, and the systems. These things rarely change in a larger organization. And if you're an entrepreneur and your business is being acquired, your thing is going to have to fit into this framework. So you understand that when you're acquired or when you acquire someone else, the strategy, the structure, the systems, though they will change a little bit, they will not change as rapidly as the skills, the style, and the staff, and who you have to work with. The average lifespan of a cybersecurity or a CISO right now is about 18 to 24 months. So again, understand that the soft elements are going to move around quite a bit. Which leads to, if the average tenure is 16 to 24 months in an organization, and that means you're more than likely going to assume someone else's program, and someone else will likely assume yours. So your goals have to be rigid. Like, we are going to reduce risk to this point. We are going to get turnover rate down to this point. We are going to build components that create extensibility for the rest of the organization. For instance, you need new firewalls, but if you get one that has a really good VPN package or a remote work package, you've increased the security posture, but you have also increased the flexibility and the extensibility of the company. So you want your goals to be rigid, but the means of that success has to be flexible, because you may be taking on somebody else's program. You have to build a program that someone can take of yours and carry it forward. So document everything. When I go into an organization, whether it's to build their security program or I'm coming in to do an incident response, the thing that I find woefully lacking across the board is documentation. I tend to believe a very simple statement, which If something isn't documented, it doesn't exist. If you have a process in place for backup and recovery, if it isn't documented, it doesn't exist. If that process doesn't require you to do test restorations, then you don't really have a backup and restoration program. You have a backup and restoration prayer. And I think prayer is altogether a good thing, but in a corporate environment and in a data center, you're going to want a little bit more than prayer. You're going to want a prayer and a plan. So make sure that everything that you're doing is very, very well documented. And as I mentioned, the structure of the organization is unlikely to change, but your individuals are going to, especially right now, especially since the beginning of the year. We're kind of in the middle of a great resignation and a great hire. And so the things that you have in place are going to be a lot easier for a new team member to pick up if they're documented. If they're relying on tribal knowledge and someone to tell them why something is there and what they should expect, it's going to take a lot longer to get them up to speed, which means your program isn't going to be as successful. And you also want to capture the information of the people that might be leaving your organization so that you're not losing that tribal knowledge. You're not losing that knowledge base as it goes. So document everything, knowing that people are going to come, people are going to go. And your goal when hiring and managing people, knowing that they are probably not going to be there the duration of their career, is that it is on you to return them to the workforce better than you received them. That means if you brought someone as a junior and they had a limited skill set, your goal is to improve their skill set and to bring them out from being a junior. Here's the reason why, or the reasons. One, it's good to return people back better than you receive them. Also, if we're all building our people that way and we're returning them that way, when you get someone else's workforce, that means you're going to get a better candidate. So make it a focus when you're building things, that you're documenting, that you're investing in your people, and that when they leave your organization, they're better than when you got them. As I mentioned, we don't last long. Even virtual CISOs, we typically are only there for 18 months, year and a half to 2 years. So you want to make sure your plan is durable. And when you're building that strategy, you want to determine why you were hired. Why were you brought in? Why are you replacing the person, your predecessor? Are they leaving on good terms? Or are they leaving on bad terms? If it's bad terms, how do you avoid stepping on those landmines? The other is there needs to be some sort of singular vision of your group. Is it securing our customers' critical needs? Is it we're just going to keep the lights on? Define what that vision is and make sure everyone knows it. Feel free to write that down in pencil. Because I don't know about y'all, but when we go back to 2019, 2020, I didn't have global pandemic on my cards on what I was predicting. And when I went into 2022, I certainly didn't have monkeypox. So as we're thinking about how the world changes, make sure that you're flexible to that. So make sure you identify those crown jewels as well, because they probably won't be what you think. Sometimes we start out saying that the critical things that we're looking at are related to credit card numbers and social security numbers. Not really the case. Most of the time it's going to be intellectual property. It's going to be some sort of trade secret. It's going to be the way that your business collects and uses data and its strategic alignments that are in place. So make sure that you're understanding what those crown jewels are and that is a universally held belief across the organization. So if you don't have a framework that you can lean on when you go in, and there isn't a defined, we have to do these things to be compliant, we have to do these things to be secure, start with that framework, but please don't try to hit 900 plus controls at once. There's just no way you're going to get through it. If you're looking at the CSC or you're looking at the CSC 18 or the critical security controls, you're going to have those first 3 or 4 that are the basics, the top 50. I want you to start there. Things like access control. What data are we holding? Do we have a good incident response plan? I want you to take the time to go through those basics and then build. And when you're looking at those basics, you can determine your gaps. Now remember, we want to quantify as much as we can so you can more clearly determine what needs more effort than another. Um, what you don't, or what you're not able to get to, start putting together those POAMs and SSPs, which are those, plan of actions and milestones. And I want you to keep in mind that you're going to have to prioritize these tasks, right? You're starting at 50, not 900. You have to prioritize those gaps based on that gap analysis and what you're going to attack first. But you're not going to be able to CapEx your way through this. This is not a singular one-time investment. And there are a lot of orgs and a lot of entrepreneurs that are moving their business into a large organization that look at a one-time fee of being secure and building this program. It's not going to work. So I want you to think about things over the long haul. Don't ask for too much money too quickly. If you go, and I know that's a weird thing to hear, especially with entrepreneurs, but there is a change appetite. There's only so much money that you're going to be able to spend right now. There's only so much that you're going to be able to change right now. So to find those gaps, define what you're wanting to change in a reasonable amount of time. Think Boston Marathon. And then ask for funding to get through those phases while continually reminding, the C-suite and the risk and the rest of those groups that, hey, we're going to have to move forward and we're going to have to do these things. Now, I want to talk about awareness and training real quick, because if you're starting your own program, or as an entrepreneur, you're becoming a part of someone else's, you probably don't have enough people on a cybersecurity team, or you may not have the budget to do that. So what I want you to do is I want you to properly train your people so that they can be your soldiers in your team. They can be your advocate. They can be your frontline defense. Make sure that you're doing continual training. Make sure that your security awareness training falls in line to what that business unit is facing, because each business unit is going to have a different threat. Operations, transportation, they're going to get different phishing. They're going to get different voice hacking attacks. They're going to get a bunch of different things than maybe ACH fraud that you're going to see over in finance. So make sure when you're doing your training across the organization that you are defining that training and refining that training to each business unit, and onboard them separately to give yourself enough time to fine-tune the approach for each one of those business units. You don't have to bring everyone on at one time. And then bite-sized pieces. No one wants to do an hour of cybersecurity awareness training, so please don't do that. And then the other is positive reinforcement. Starbucks gift cards, transfers on the mobile app, they still go a long way. I want to talk about this last bit as we part. You need to have a change management. You need to have an incident response plan. If you do not have an incident response plan, or even the beginnings of one, I want you to email me. I will give you the framework for you to begin your incident response plan. Doesn't cost anything. I'm not going to add you to an email list. I'm not going to spam you on LinkedIn. But I want to make sure when you leave here that you can start building that incident response plan to help your new organization, or the one you've recently joined, in preparing for things like ransomware, phishing, business email compromises. Now, when I send you this plan for you to get started with and to build your own, I want to make sure that you do not store that plan on a server, okay? So super captain obvious if you've been here before, but if my team is deployed to come to your business to do incident response plan and to try to get you out of hot water, if you have that plan stored on that server that's encrypted with ransomware, we're going to have a really, really long day. So after you go through building out that plan, and if you have questions, please reach out to me. My personal email address is right here on this tile. Again, I will not spam you, solicit you, any of those things. I want to make sure you gave me a half hour. I want to give you something back in return. And everyone, I thank you for your time, and I appreciate you attending today. If you have any questions, I am thrilled to answer them.
Patrick, thanks so much. Great tips. Couple of quick thoughts just for me. I found it interesting that there's more soft S's than hard S's. I think that says something. I loved your concept about anybody you work with, that when you return them back to the workforce, you return them a more complete person, a more well-rounded person. What better way from a culture or employee morale or training or that next generation of leaders approach would that certainly be? And lastly, but certainly not least, we, not I, right? How,
Always.
how often do we see, you see editorials from politicians and every sentence starts with an I as opposed to we, and great advice, great insights for our audience today.
Thank you, sir.
So thank you.
Thank
Thank you for joining Leading Entrepreneurs of the World. We wish you continued success. No wonder we're at maybe 251 on your talks, because you do a spectacular job.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Everyone have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Patrick. Take care. Bye.